Okay, so in part one, we were talking about the moon as this final struggle against the ego for transformation, about it as the narrow path, the way into the underworld, and the crossing this path between the two pillars, right in the center, the middle path. The dung beetle carrying the sun in its dimmest point at midnight through the underworld till it can reach the horizon and be lifted up to become the sun once again. And that all around, all surrounding this narrow path, there is illusion, there is distraction, there's these temptations that are trying to make you hold on, to save one little ounce of your being, rather than this complete surrender. So what is this abyss? The abyss is a place of hopelessness. It's a place where you have no choice. A place or a moment where you have no choice but to flow, to go forward, to move. It's that moment of this final test of either stay or move. Die or try to resist, try to do anything not to die. It's this moment of change. You're trying to hold on to anything that's yours, to your ideas, to your hopes, even to your basic self. You're tempted to try to look away, to look behind, to look at either side, to look at this side of the path as a place where you can get off and be stuck there, right? And then you vanish, then you're petrified, you're turned into a pillar of salt. You become trapped before this abyss because you haven't realized that the abyss, that the darkness, that this moment of hopelessness is actually from within you, and it's not something that is resolved by trying to stay you. It's resolved by transforming. When you're emptying yourself as the star, you're meant to wash away all of your being. Right? But this final challenge that comes forward shows you all of this again. And it says, if you might want to just grab one of those things that you thought that you'd washed away. And if you do, you get trapped in this cycle all over again, the cycle of destruction. So you're symbolically devoured by koronzon, stuckness. You're shut up inside of yourself, trapped inside of yourself, because of your inability to change, your unwillingness to flow. So, the great secret of the moon, the teaching of the moon, is that in this last step, the very final step, it can't be something that you do. You go through this effort, this shedding off, this fighting, and all of it is ultimately still you trying to let go of more and more of these things that you still try to hold on to. And as you let go of more, you get to these more fundamental elements of the most basic idea of what you think is yourself. And it becomes harder and harder to let go of those basic ideas, right? But at the end point, that point right at the horizon where there's this cliff, and what you see are those dewdrops, the dewdrops of the moon, that are the Holy Spirit, represented by the dove, right? That is what will lift you up through the moon and transform you into the sun. Those are not something that you can step on. They're ephemeral. They don't depend on you. You have to shed every last part of you to become a part, to become one of those dewdrops, one drop in the ocean. Enlightenment is described in many Eastern traditions as the drop of water flowing down the river and returning to the ocean. So this step, the step of that moment of awakening, is a step that is a complete surrender. This moment is a moment that no mind can even manage to conceive of, because it's a moment that you can't even make a step for. You can't have a movement. You can't say, I'm going to do it, I'm going to step forward. Because if you're truly in that moment of eternity, that moment that is beyond time, then how can there be any movement? If you take a film and you stop at one freeze frame representing one instant of time, what do you see? You see everything frozen. There's no actual motion there. So what is it that creates the motion? Where does the motion come from? It doesn't come from inside of you. It comes from this grace, this thing beyond you, completely outside of you. So there's nothing you can do to make it happen. And it's only when you accept that final element, the surrender of the very self, and you know it's not anything you can do, then that's what allows yourself to be completely shut off and united with these dewdrops, with this moon. So this is something that's a very poor explanation of a concept that can't actually be explained. But to put it another way, people aren't afraid of death. What they're really afraid of is annihilation. That's something that Alan Watts used to say. That if you just thought, okay, well, I'm dead, right? I don't exist anymore, but I'm in heaven, or even I'm in hell. Those are still better options, right? Even this context of this worldview of there's the heavenly realms, and maybe I'll get there, and if I'm bad, though, I'll be punished, but I'll still exist. Whereas simply not existing, not being around anymore, being completely annihilated, that's something that is very frightening to us. Why? Because we still get this idea that we're going to somehow be there. We're going to be within ourselves and yet not be. And it's that idea of somehow conscious annihilation that is the most frightening thing to us. It's being completely separated and completely alone. So out of our fear, what do we do to avoid this aloneness, to avoid this separation? We separate ourselves from the world. We create these little barriers, these little towers, these places where we can feel protected. And so we keep ourselves apart because we're afraid of becoming alone. It seems crazy, but it's basically what we do. And we do this because the other option is to not exist anymore, and we're afraid of that. But non-existence is actually a returning to the source, a uniting. What you thought was you doesn't exist anymore. There's this other thing that does exist, and that is the real part of you. It's where you come from. It's coming back home, coming back to the source. The very last thing that has to be dropped is therefore the idea of seeking enlightenment itself. This idea that you are going to be the one that becomes enlightened, that you are going to be changed in some majestic and marvelous way, and that this enlightenment is something that's going to happen to you. It doesn't. Enlightenment happens. It doesn't happen to you. Enlightenment is not my enlightenment. It's an enlightenment that has happened, right? The very last thing that the Buddha had to give up was his desire to become the Buddha. And if you can do that, then you are truly empty and you can cross the abyss. And when you do, we enter the sun, which will be the topic of our next video.